Hi, welcome back to the Recruitment and Beyond podcast. Today we are joined by Gill Ogilvie, who is the Managing Director for the Edinburgh office of Will Rudd. Gill, great to have you with us. Thanks for joining us.
That's great. Thanks for inviting me, Ewan.
So today we really wanted to delve into the topic of authenticity and how important it is, but how challenging it can be sometimes for people to bring their true self, their own personality to work. And I think the value of making sure that people do feel that they can do that, because that's where innovation is driven from. That is where we can really deliver real value to our businesses. And I think, Jill, you've got a few stories to tell in terms of just the challenges, but also the opportunities that it creates in terms of that. So do you want to tell us a little bit about your role right now and your career to date?
Yeah, so I am Managing Director of Will Rudd in the Edinburgh office. We are a civil and structural engineering firm, which means we design buildings, infrastructure, roads, bridges, anything really that we need to maintain our civilization. And we have the office in Edinburgh that I run, and we have a sister office in Glasgow and in Dublin. And so I started at Will Rudd 21 years ago as a little assistant engineer, I think, and I've worked my way up over the last 20 years or so and took over as managing director and co-owner in 2020. So peak pandemic, great time to take over a business. And so for the last 6 years, I've been recovering from
that. Brilliant. Yes, I mean, a challenging time to take on any kind of role, but that is definitely a tough time. So I guess, as I mentioned, we've talking about being that authentic self. So what does it... what does being your authentic self at work mean in practical terms? So for those who may be in the early stage of their career and trying to get involved in any organisation, what does that really mean?
I mean, my experience is that it was tough at the beginning, because when I was a young engineer, my first job was on a construction site. I definitely did not want to be my authentic self. What I wanted to do was just blend in with everybody else and just be like everybody else. And what I tried to do was just be one of the guys. And that was everything from the way I spoke. Goodness, my language was appalling, to the way I dressed, just in a very masculine way, the way I cut my hair, everything, to just try and blend in and just try and be one of the guys. And I think it's very challenging to step out of that. Certainly in the career I was in, I was doing well to just be taken seriously and get through my day. And I have slowly but surely come into my own, and over my, whatever that is, 25, 30 years in construction now, have really embraced how I bring something different, and that is important and that is valuable. And I'm really passionate about everybody trying to embrace their authentic self, because we are all different. And that diversity will bring new ideas, and that diversity will make other people more comfortable to be their authentic self. So we get away from this monoculture and we get into a much more diverse culture. And like you say, that brings innovation and it brings value to people. People feel more valued if they can present as their authentic selves and are taken at that face value.
Why do you think that, particularly in the early career, that women feel that pressure to fit in? Particularly in certain industries, but you mentioned there the construction industry.
Yeah.
Why do you think that's the case?
Well, I do have a theory about this, and I was in a good way pulled up on this the other day. I think that we still live in a patriarchal society. And speaking from my own experience, I was brought up to be a good girl, and I was brought up to be compliant, and I was brought up to not make a fuss. And I am still working hard to break free from that. And I am a real people pleaser. I really want people to like me and to say that I'm a nice person. And that isn't always compatible with setting boundaries. And that isn't always compatible with standing up for yourself. Because if you're going to stand up for yourself and make a bit of a fuss, you are not being a compliant, good girl that's, standing back in the background. So from my experience, that was what I was brought up with. And I absolutely think that your upbringing has such a lot to do with it. I had a very, very encouraging childhood. I've had very encouraging parents, great education. I mean, I would really have had to try hard not to succeed in some way. But at my core, there was still that real belief that I had to please other people, and I had to make sure that they were happy, and I had to make sure that I wasn't making a fuss. And I think I'm much more interested now in taking up the space that I'm entitled to, and to saying, actually, that doesn't really suit me to do that. And it was really lovely, actually, to just, when I was thinking about this podcast, to just think a bit about what I had been like as a young engineer graduate, straight out on site. I mean, that is a baptism of fire. What on earth was I thinking? I clearly had I look back on it now, and I think I had some sort of inner steel and determination to do this.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, that was a crazy thing to be doing. And the amount of banter or inappropriate comments or, sexist remarks that I just laughed off in the name of just being one of the guys, just making sure that nobody thought I was that absolute feminist nightmare. I mean, I think back on that now, and I think, well, what else could I have done? I was a young woman trying to fit in, but I would not do that now.
No, absolutely. It's interesting. There's lots in that to unpack, I suppose, and part of it because I'm very much a people pleaser as well, and I share the need to please people, particularly early in your career. And do you think that comes from experience or lack thereof? When you're in that environment, and you want to ensure that you're not quite sure of your place, and I guess that part of that. I mean, it's a different world, and there's different occupations, and certain areas lend themselves to that more than others do. But do you think there's something in that as you've grown and your experience has grown, it's enabled you to understand your place in the team? And I know that's probably an easy thing to say, but certainly from my point of view as well, it was in that early career you felt, I want to fit in. I don't want, I want to please people. I want to make sure they like me. And I wonder if that's part of that, is that experience. And how do you then create an environment where people can come into there and feel like they can just be themselves, whether they're early in their career or they're, much more experienced?
I mean, it's always nice to meet a fellow people pleaser, isn't it? It can be crippling at times. I think that's so right, Ewan. I think when I was early on in my career, as I say, I was brought up to be that person who was going to help you out, to be that person who was going to make you feel good, do whatever you asked of me. Just, regardless of what I wanted to do, I would do it for you. And I think maybe it's an age and stage thing. As you get older, you start thinking, well, actually, I don't really want to do that. And I think the healthy response to that is to say, hey, I'm sorry, I don't really want to do that. So here's another solution. Or, hey, I don't really want to do that. That doesn't sit with my values. So, we're not going to go that way, or I'm not going to go that way, or I'm not going to do that. But I think more often what happens is that people just don't do it. They go, yeah, I'm totally going to do that. I'm totally on it. Absolutely. And then they just don't do it. And that is not helpful for anyone. And that's just made me think of exactly what I was doing when I joined Will Rudd. When I joined Will Rudd, the guy that interviewed me, Stuart Davidson, he was the managing director at the time. And he was such a supporter of mine. He was an absolute superstar. He saw something in me that I clearly did not see in myself. And he said, if you're lucky enough to get this job, we'd like you to join Women in Property. And I was like, in my head, I was going, are you crazy? I'm not joining Women in Property. I've spent my whole life trying not to be a woman in property. Why on earth would I join an organization that broadcasts that? And so I said, I'd really love to do that. That would be a really great thing for me to do. Because I wanted the job. Of course. And so 6 months later, in my first review, he says, so, you've not joined Women in Property. You said you would. And I was like, I'm totally on it. I just trying to fit in, new job, just really busy. A year later, he's like, why are you not joining this Women in Property? I was like, for the love of God, I'm just going to have to join this organization. Filled in the form, did nothing about it. And actually, Women in Property is one of the best things I've ever done. And I subsequently found out after Stuart Davidson died a few years ago, and I was speaking to a woman after his funeral, and she said, he rang me and said, I've got this girl, she's just started with me. I do not know what is wrong with her, but she is adamant she's not joining Women in Property. And so he'd kind of pushed me into it, and it was honestly the best thing ever. But I think it would have been so much better when I look back on that now if I'd said, look, Stuart, I'm really not keen on being forced into this thing because I'm trying not to be a woman in property. I'm trying to just fit in. And then we could have had a grown-up conversation about it where he said, well, I think it's really good for networking. Networking is what you need to do. That's how you're going to build your business. That's how you're going to build your career. So I think it's in your best interest. We didn't have that conversation. And that bravery to say, I'm not that kind of person to do women in property. I'm too busy trying not to be a woman in property. To then have his understanding and reasoning behind it, for me to then maybe go, yeah, okay, I hear you, but this is not for me. I'm going to join this organization over there. Or, oh, I get it now. I'm going to go and join that organization. So I think it's important to try and vocalize what you're not cool with, because then you can have the open conversation about it. Yeah,
no, that's really valuable actually, and it's interesting to hear you kind of define it in that way. That look, I don't really want to join a women in property group because that's not me. I'm trying to differentiate myself from that, and that's really challenging. I suppose really challenging to hear, but in the mindset and where you were at that point, that's exactly what you were trying to do. And it's, I mean, on one side, it's a real shame that you felt you needed to do that, but on the other side, you can understand why you were feeling like that and what you wanted to do. Yeah,
and actually, women in property ended up being one of the best things I ever did. Obviously, obviously, Stuart, thanks very much. Because it did build my network, and because I did make connections, and I think it also gave me access to different choices. It gave me access to, because I am very conscious that I was confident enough in myself. I had a good enough network by this point. So my ability to say not working for me was growing all the time, because I was building this network of people who would support me, worst case scenario, to find a new job, who would support me, to introduce me to other people who would help me find a job, or would give me access to a mentor to help me build that. And I think I am very conscious of people who don't have that level of inner confidence, that sort of rod of steel that I talked about earlier in my choosing to go into a building site, that I didn't really know I had. I didn't really know that. I just knew that if it all went to hell in a handcart, I could turn up on my parents' doorstep and they would look after me. But not everybody has that. And so the choices that you have to deal with some less than ideal situations are less obvious, I think. And so I think that's what another thing that women in property gave me.
Yeah, I want to come back to that, but I just wanted to understand if there was a period or a point in time, particularly in your earlier career, where it was like a turning point, sliding doors moment. You thought, no, wait a minute, and it gave you that confidence in your, to start to be your authentic self. Was there an event or something that happened, or perhaps it was the women in property thing where eventually you said, yes, I'll do it?
I mean, I think that was too early for me. All I was doing at Women in Property was all I was doing. All I was doing is going along and having a drink and having a nice chat with nice people. It wasn't that monumental, but I met a business coach who actually still works with Will Rudd now. And she introduced me to Brené Brown, and Brené Brown has been a real inspiration for me in how I have found my authentic self. And she has really been key to me trying to find that absolutely solid. She talks about standing on your sacred ground. So you stand in a position where you are comfortable. You don't puff up and go, oh my God, I know everything about everything, and I'm just brain central and I can answer all your questions. But you also don't go small and you're like, sorry, I don't mean to make a fuss, but you're just grounded, confident. And she calls that standing on your own sacred ground. And this business coach, Carolyn Stenhouse, and I have worked together now for probably, 10, 15 years, something like that. And she really was my light bulb moment of, okay, I've got something here. I've got something worth sharing. I've got some way of approaching things that has value. So she was definitely my epiphanal moment.
Oh, yes.
She knows that. I tell her that all the time. She does that.
It's funny, the strength of character that you will have had to put yourself in that position originally, is a real strength in itself. But it's so often overlooked by individuals, do it myself, other people do, when you don't recognise the strength it's taken just to get you onto the building site, as you mentioned, and to be able to, I suppose, to be able to look back at that and say, that was a real strength at the time, is to just to be able to do that. And that didn't give you the strength or the confidence at that point to say, well, look what I've done, and what else can I do? And I know it's a habit of many people is not to see the strength inside them already. And perhaps that's a scenario where it is controlled. And I wonder if you could, if there's any structures or cultural barriers that are there just now within that kind of traditionally male-dominated environments that make it difficult for people to come out and be their authentic self.
I think it's really complex, because I don't believe patriarchal stereotypes suit men or women. I think that men are held to as painful and unachievable societal stereotypes as women are. And so the alpha male who cannot show weakness is can be for some men a really difficult stereotype to overcome. And so if you don't present in that way, then you are hiding as much of yourself as I was when I was rocking up with short hair and shapeless male clothes on, and speaking in a way that I thought was the way that engineers spoke, And what I think is important, that if I am now my honest, authentic self, as much as I absolutely can be, then I am encouraging other people of whatever gender or diverse characteristic to present as their own self. And those patriarchal societal expectations can be crippling for men and women. And my experience of the construction industry in Scotland is that there is still, though it is much, much better, a pervading white, heterosexual, male bias.
Yeah.
And anybody who is able to turn up and be their authentic self in that, I absolutely support and applaud, because the more people that do that, the more people will feel comfortable doing that.
Yeah.
And therefore, the more people that will do that, and therefore the more people that will feel comfortable doing that.
Absolutely.
And so I think I'm of the opinion that we are still, all of us, subconsciously or consciously, trying to live up to a stereotype that is unhelpful in many ways.
Yeah. Do you think, I mean, we've talked about being authentic, but a lot of that seems to come out in through confidence. Do you think that organisations place too much responsibility on people being confident, and that is you being your authentic self, when in actual fact, for some people, that's not who they are, and they're never going to be that? And do you think that is perhaps sometimes what organisations are looking for? We're looking for the people who can stand up and, you know, do a presentation to the whole company and so on. But in actual fact, my strength is, you know, delivering what I do on a day-to-day basis, but doing it my way and feeling I'm comfortable to do that.
I think that's a really good question, because I think if we go back to standing on your own sacred ground,
Yes.
there is an inherent confidence there. And that's not to say you need to be outgoing and chatty and standing at the front of a room giving a PowerPoint. You do have to have that inherent confidence in your own skill and your own value and your own place in the world. And I think you're right. There are many people who would not present as outwardly confident, outwardly go-getters, who can still stand on their own sacred ground and say, I'm good with this. I'm happy with my approach. I'm happy with how I present to the world. I'm in a company that values that. So I'm getting that back from them. And it doesn't necessarily have to present as the loudest person in the room, but it does have to have that inherent value and worth. And when we look at the work that we do at Will Rudd, we were just doing a session today at lunchtime actually about the anatomy of trust. So Brené Brown has this thing about braving, so boundaries, reliability, accountability. You're really going to test me now. Vault, integrity, non-judgment, generosity, only because I've done it about an hour ago. So these 7 things are what makes up trust. Now, we've got a room of 40 people. Our associates and senior engineers are leading this seminar on Brené Brown's braving. And there are people in that room who I know their toes are curling. They're like, oh my God, she's going to make us talk about feelings again. And I just can't bear it. And I'm cool with that. I don't need you to search your inner self, but I need you to engage enough with this. So if you're standing on your sacred ground going, I do not do feelings, I do not do talking about what I want from my life at work, I'm totally cool with that. But do not rain on the parade of the people who do want to do that. So it's about being respectful and knowing your value and knowing your worth and knowing what you're interested in and what you're not. And I'm cool with that. Up to a point.
I think that's quite interesting actually. It's just about setting boundaries, I guess, and you know, how someone can set those boundaries without feeling that they're at risk of how they're perceived within the organisation. So you're absolutely right. You know, someone who's, look, I'm not that person who's going to stand up there. However, I will contribute to the group because I've got some great ideas. But I don't want people to think I'm aloof or I'm not part of the gang. But you know, I've got plenty to add, and I suppose it's just how do you create that organisation where people do feel confident in being able to say, "That's not me."
So true. And it depends if if I'm speaking from the position of a managing director, where I am trying to grow that culture in my organization, I am trying to get us to a position where we are able to set boundaries, where we are able to say, I'm holding you to account because you said you would do A and B is what's been happening, and you are my director and I'm still going to hold you to account.
Yeah.
I guess that's a question you have to ask my staff, whether I'm doing that or not well. But I think there is so if I'm speaking from the position of a managing director and I'm speaking to other managing directors, my very first thing is go and read Dare to Lead by Brené Brown, and then send it around your whole organization. We did it as a directorial group, then we brought the associates into it. Now we've brought the associates and senior engineers into it. And now this is us going to all the staff, all 40 of us. Directors, associates, senior engineers know all about trust and the braving analogy. Now you all need to learn it so that we've all got this common language. So if I'm speaking to the managing directors, I'm saying, go and read Brené Brown and implement it in your organization. If I'm going to speak to the young graduate on site who doesn't have the leverage that I do, who doesn't have the power to make that change, I guess I'm saying, go and read Dare to Lead by Brené Brown and put it in front of your manager and say, I am trying to have an open conversation with you about why this is not working for me.
Yeah.
Because I think by being open with what you want, there's more likelihood that you're going to get it.
Yeah. So
my question is, what do you want? So if you're asking somebody to, young graduate who's been told that they need to go and do, I don't know, finite element analysis for 6 months on a concrete structure and it's dull as ditch water and they just don't want to do it.
Yeah.
You have to be brave and you have to say, I don't want to do that because A, B, and C. And is there an opportunity over here for me to do D, E, and F?
Yeah.
And I hear what you're saying, I think, which is, what if the boss comes back to you and says, they're a pain in the arse, going to get them out the door? That's where the privilege of choice comes in.
Yeah.
Because if I have this inner core of steel that I talked about, I would be able to say, this is just not the organization for me. They want me to do and churn this. I'm going over here. But if you don't have that and you're trying to make the rent and you're trying to survive, you're going to buckle down and do that. So you need to recognize that I have that privilege of, as I say, I knew that I could turn up on my parents' doorstep and they would look after me.
Yeah.
But I also went to Women in Property and I also built my network so that I knew that in that regard, if it all went to hell in a handcart, I would also first start with, do you know anyone that's looking for an engineer? Because I need to get out of here.
Yeah.
And I think it gives you, so I guess I keep coming back to this. It's about network. It's about, building that ability to make choices that allow you to take a different path.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's two things with that, and I think you've touched on them both there. One is you are interviewing the company as much as they are interviewing you. Be really diligent about the company you're going into and try your best to identify the culture that's there, knowing fine well that it's not always as it seems, but you want to walk in somewhere where you can have that conversation. And equally, it comes from the top, doesn't it? So as you've touched on there, everybody's to look at this book, to look at this structure, this approach, to ensure that everybody from managing director right down through the management team and the leadership team knows that we want to create a culture where people are comfortable to come and say, look, 6 months looking at that is probably not where I want to be. I'm happy to do it, but is there a way that we can structure this so that in 3 months I can start moving forward into something else? And I feel so passionate about the fact that people should feel that they should come and be able to have that conversation. I think everybody recognizes that you have to do your bit, you know, as you're going through your career and you're doing your early stage, and there are things you won't necessarily want to do, but recognizing that the vision of where you want to be is part of that process. And then thirdly, as you touched on, it's a choice. And we find this as well, that people, if organizations promise things that aren't necessarily delivered, people will up and leave and find something else. Not necessarily tomorrow, but they will start the ball rolling, and then they will think, well, actually, this isn't for me. And people are more willing to make
out.
And they've checked out.
And mentally they've checked out, and you're not getting the best out of them.
No, absolutely.
And I think that's so true. And I just, you know, culture is a word that is bandied around all the time. We have a cultural change group, because I was adamant that we are changing this culture. We did a staff engagement survey, and one of the top things that came out of that was, we, as an organization, I've been here 20 years. My other directors, I think the new boy's been there 10 years. So, you know, we are long service people. Two of my directors are 25 years service. I'm 21, one's 19. You know, we are in with the bricks here. And the problem with that is, I know them like pals. You know, I do not want to upset them. I really, it's really tough to have a difficult conversation that says, do you know what, that didn't work for me. That didn't work for me. I didn't like it. You said you'd do A, B, and C. You didn't do it. And that was the number one thing that came out of the staff survey, was directors cannot have difficult conversations. They're really great. Everybody is so super at saying, oh my God, great job. Great job. Really well done. I really appreciated that. You really helped me out there. Thank you so much. We really struggled with having difficult conversations. So we've done a lot of work in being able to say, that's not working for me. You said you would do A, B, and C. It's 3 days later. You said you'd have it done in 3 days. You haven't done it. That's not working for me. And when you do that, I feel, we did a whole load of nonviolent communication by Marshall Rosenberg, the book. He has this structure of, I mean, this boy is amazing. They wheel him out to the Palestinian-Israeli peace talks, Marshall Rosenberg. He's that guy. He's that guy that can get those two people to speak to each other. Obviously, slightly less important, the Will Rudd management team meeting. But we did this whole three weeks of 2-hour sessions. Our management consultant did this nonviolent communication. And it's all about, when you said that you were going to issue that report on Thursday, it went out on Friday. And I feel a little bit disrespected, because, you know, you promised me you'd do it. It was important to me and you didn't. So it would be really good if you could tell me if there's a problem next time with it issuing on time, so that I can ring the client in advance and tell them there's a problem with it. Now, there's no danger we pick that up every time we're having a rant. There's no danger. But we have a common language now that says, I'm going to, when you, and you can hear these words coming, you can see everyone going, when you, and you're like, oh my God, it's one of the, but you approach it in a totally different way. And so I think, I don't even know what your question was, Ewan. Culture, important. What I was going to say is, I think if you're sitting in an interview and somebody on the other side of the table, so from the hiring company, is saying, this is our culture, this is what we do, this is what's important to us. And in the weeks that come after that, if that's not there, you should be able to call them out on that. You should be able to say, in the interview, you said, we have integrity. And I was in this meeting and that happened, and I don't think that's integrity. You know, are we talking about that? Because I think people are so broad brush about culture. They're so, this is our culture. What does it really mean? What does it really mean in how we do things?
Absolutely. And I've actually just come from a conversation about culture and how it has it. Things like values have to be able to be measured. They have to be able to say, look, this is part of why it moves our business forward. A vision and a set of values are not about putting something on the wall to say this is who we are. It's actually practically implementing that, and part of that is having that. I think I can't remember how you phrased it, but the confidence to have that conflict, the confidence to say, look, the conflict will help our business move forward. So actually, we need to have that. Safe conflict, if you like, or however it's phrased. But that is such an important part. It is an important part of authenticity. It's an important part of business, because if everybody agrees, then there's probably a challenge there, and there's probably an issue, because that's the whole point of having a diverse culture in your organization, is that people will disagree, but you'll come together in a collective direction that says, okay, well, we've had that debate and we're going in the right direction. And I think that's really healthy. And I think creating that organization where you can have a constructive criticism is really valuable.
And really hard for us.
And really hard. Well, listen, it's certainly not easy, but it's and so part of that, I suppose, that authenticity comes with a bit of resilience. Resilience is a critical part of business, right throughout that your career, right from when you first start, right throughout the process. So, how important is it that you're able to create a space where people feel like they can show a bit of resilience, they can show a bit of just not stubbornness, I suppose, but being able to stand up for themselves and feel that they're quite comfortable in that environment.
I think resilience for me is the ability to try and to fail, and to create an organization where failure is acceptable, and that we try with best intentions, with whole heart, generously to succeed. And it won't always work out, and we will dust ourselves down, and we will pick ourselves up, and we will go forward, and we will learn from that. And when I think about that question of the culture of the organization, people need to see people failing. And that it isn't the end of our world, that we will learn from it and pick ourselves up and go again. And you have to have some compassion for yourself, that you might go home and drink a bucket of wine and collapse into bed and think this is the end of my wee world for a day, and dust yourself down and pick yourself up and come back again, because that you will be supported through that failure, and that you will be allowed to fail again, and not be judged for that.
I think, again, going back to creating that organization where that is, nobody wants to fail, but it's an important part of learning, and creating an environment where people know that, okay, I can try and test this, and I'll give it a shot, and if it doesn't work, then like you say, it's not the end of my world, period. It is the end of the world today. I'll dust myself down, I'll come back in, and there'll be somebody in the team who'll go, do you know what, don't worry, we've all been there, here's a few ideas, or what did you think, and what did you learn, and how can we do it again differently? And again, it's having that confidence and that in your organization, to know that I know that people will obviously have a look at what we've done, and we'll be honest about it, and that honesty is critical to that, isn't it, as well? And I think this all shapes an organization where somebody can come in and really be authentically themselves, knowing that I think everybody tries to fit in the vain hope that they don't make a mistake, they don't stand out, they're not the person who people are pointing at and having a laugh at a coffee break and so on. But that stifles innovation and it stifles creativity, doesn't it? So you've got to have the organisation where you can feel you can do that.
Yeah, it's so important.
So I mean, listen, it's a fascinating discussion, and I could I could talk about this all day. I'm really interested in this and that part of how you structure your teams. But if you had a few tips, maybe 3 tips that we could give to those who are trying to maybe create this within their organisation and a safe environment for people to be authentically themselves, have you got any ideas or any thoughts that we could give out to the audience?
I definitely think find a support group. So find a women in property or a young directors forum or the Scottish Property Federation have I've forgotten what they're called, like new leaders section that comes up. So find a group of people who are like-minded, because they will support you in giving you the confidence that your ideas are not bat crazy. And I think that's important, because in your organization, there may be people who think you're not really getting it. But if you have someone even outside you going, no, I really think the same. I really think this has got legs. I really think you should go for it. Then it gives you that confidence to say, I'm going to give this a bash. I'm going to give this a go. I think I absolutely would tell anybody to go and find Brené Brown, find her website. It's all over that. There's workbooks, there's exercises. There's so many exercises that I have done that help me still every day. They're very simple. They're very practical. And one of our other big things is be brave. Be brave. She talks about, I think it's a Theodore Roosevelt quote, that it's the man in the arena that counts. It's the gladiator in the arena who turns up every day, gets whatever kicked down, his face in the sand, whatever dramatic thing. Not the people in the cheap seats who are shouting advice. They don't count. It's not the people in the cheap seats that count. It's the one in the arena. So be brave, and make sure you have choices. Make sure you have choices and that you are making the most of those choices, which I absolutely get takes time. Sometimes it takes time to build your ability to have those choices. And so to that end, I say network early and network often, because I left it later than I should have. I should have listened to Stuart Davidson, should have joined Women in Property on day one, but your network is what is going to help you to grow and help you to thrive. And so network early and network often.
Brilliant. That has been a fantastic discussion. Thank you very much for your time today, Gill. It's been a really a good discussion. And what we'll do is we'll take that the website you mentioned there. We'll stick that in the show notes.
That'd be brilliant. Yeah.
And thank you very much for your time, and look forward to catching up again soon.
Yeah, thanks very much, Ewan.
Thanks for listening to the Recruitment and Beyond podcast. Hopefully there's plenty of insight for you to take back to your team. So don't forget to subscribe and never miss an episode. And if you can, leave us a review. We really appreciate all the feedback and support we get. It makes a massive difference.